And welcome, everyone. We're here today in a new place, but we're here to give you the same type of enlightening information that we always give you here at TV Courtroom. If I didn't say it before, I'll say it right now. And as our producer extraordinaire, Roland, pointed out, this is yours truly, attorney Michael Cord. That's Michael Cord, Esquire, aka Michael X, aka the angriest black man in America. And you notice a little different setup here. Normally, if we're not in the studio doing what we do here with TV Courtroom, I'm doing it from my home studio. But because of some heavy duty renovation work taking place, I didn't want you to hear all the drilling and buzzing and sawing noises. So we decided to take it outside. So now I'm doing it from my comfortable gazebo, covered, shaded, and quite comfortable. And the information that we always give will be just as powerful as it always is. Again, this is yours truly, attorney Michael Cord, aka Michael X, aka the angriest black man in America. Now, what we might do, in fact, we certainly will do in light of the setup here, we might take a quick break for a minute or two, or maybe about, say, 3:42. Might take a break for a minute or two, and then at 3:45 we'll have our guest on. But because of this arrangement here, we might need to rearrange a few things. So at exactly 3:42, we'll take a quick break and then be right back about 2 minutes after that. There's a lot to talk about today. Two things that we'll be talking about today are prepared. We had everything lined up. One is the upcoming tragic anniversary of what took place back on September 15, 1963. So next week, it'll actually be the anniversary date of one of the most tragic assaults, tragic racist assaults in American history that took place but exactly 59 years ago, September 15, 1963, at precisely 10:24 a.m. Historians in America call it Four Little Girls. That's where the tragic bombing took place at the 16th Street Baptist Church. And because I do this show the first Friday of every month, we try to do things that are timely. So within about a week or so, normally we do it the first Friday, but of course there was Labor Day, so we bumped it to the second Friday, which is today, Friday, September 9, 2022. And because the next time I come on will be the first Friday in October, I wanted to make sure you all know about what really happened on September 15, 1963. And it's not just me, attorney Michael Cord, aka Michael X, aka the angriest black man in America, who's saying it was a tragic event. None other than then President John F. Kennedy called it cruel and tragic. That's a quote. None other than the great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called it, quote, one of the most vicious and tragic crimes ever perpetrated against humanity, unquote. So we're going to get into that, and we prepared that. In addition, we have two guests. One is Stephen Branch. The other is Reginald Allen. Stephen Branch is going to tell you a story about allegations of employment discrimination, but worse than that, systemic racism at Temple University from his standpoint. Joining him, that being Stephen Branch, will be attorney Reginald Allen, who has 25 years of experience as an employment discrimination attorney and a civil rights attorney. So those two items are all on the agenda. We planned to talk about that. But then just a day ago, you all heard about the death of Queen Elizabeth. Now, I'm going to be respectful not only to the audience, but certainly to the ownership and management of Philly Cam, because I don't want to say anything disrespectful that would make the station, the cable station, the broadcasting organization to appear to be insensitive. And by the way, I did say I'm outside, so you might hear some background noise going around. Thankfully, based on our technology, but more important, based on our expert technician / producer / engineer Roland, he'll be able to kind of blur out and muffle some of the background sound. But my point is, we have two topics we prepared for. The 59th anniversary of one of the most tragic racist assaults in American history. I mean, what could be worse than attacking little girls? That's it right there. And then we want to talk about allegations of systemic racism at Temple University. But as I was about to say before you heard the background noise, I guess they call it music, but I call it background noise, the death of Queen Elizabeth. And I don't want to be disrespectful, so I'm going to speak slowly and cautiously by framing it like this. If a person represents, if a person symbolizes, if a person personifies some of the worst evil in world history, what do you say when they pass away? We all see nice looking little old men pass away, 90 years old, 100 years old. We see nice looking little old ladies, 90, 100 years old. And because we see them and they seem so innocent, our heart bleeds for them and for their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. That's initially. But think about it this way. What if we find out that that little old lady or that little old man, that sweet looking little old lady, that sweet looking little old man represented some horrific evil? Then should we glorify them? And you notice how slow I'm speaking, and that's by design because I don't want to be disrespectful. Britain, apart from the ancient Roman Empire, was the most wicked empire in world history. They were the leading colonizing empire in world history. They wouldn't just go to different countries and oppress and exploit and rob and murder the inhabitants. They would go to continents like Africa and Asia and rob it and rape it and exploit it and destroy it, and then go back to England and sit on the throne, and people talk about what a great country that is. Well, if you rob and steal and cheat, then you're going to be able to accumulate wealth, but that's ill-gotten gains. And from that ill-gotten gain, you have what you have here. So people are shedding tears for Queen Elizabeth, but if you know about the history of Queen Elizabeth, then maybe you wouldn't be shedding tears. As I pointed out, we're broadcasting from outside, and when you're outside, anything can go on. And as you might hear in the background, there appears to be a lot going on. I'm hoping that by the time we get to our guest, we won't have as much. We're going to try to see what we can do to minimize that distraction. Time now is 3:38. In about 4 minutes or so, we're going to take a quick break for a minute or so, see if we can adjust some things, and then we'll come back. So again, remember the three topics I mentioned. One, the tragic bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, where 4 sweet, innocent, defenseless little girls age 11 and 14. One was 11, the 3 others were 14. They go to Sunday school on the morning of September 15, 1963. And in the morning, during the Sunday school session, they're being taught a sermon called A Love That Forgives. They get there 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, they hear this sermon in Sunday school, and then they're getting ready to line up to go to the 11 o'clock service inside the church. And at exactly 10:24 a.m., a bomb explodes and body parts are flying everywhere. And you can never forget that. And that's why we're here today, TV Courtroom, to tell you what happened and what is still happening. That's one topic. The second topic is allegations of racial discrimination, employment discrimination, and systemic racism against Temple University. We're going to hear from a man who's going to tell you his story about what he says happened. We're also going to hear from his attorney. Those are the 2 topics we had planned to discuss. And then we'll get into the breaking news that we weren't prepared for, what we want to get into. So time now 3:40. At 3:42, we're going to take a break for about a minute or two, and then we're going to make some adjustments to the extent that we can, because again, normally we're either in the studio at Philly Cam or we're in my home studio at my house, but I'm having renovations done at my home. So there's drilling and hammering and sawing. So I figured, hey, I'd come outside and do it in my gazebo like I did this past Saturday for my radio courtroom show. And it was perfect. But today, for whatever reason, some neighbors from, I don't know, 4 or 5 houses down seem to know that I'm talking about what I'm talking about today, and they apparently don't want to hear it. So here we are having to deal with that. So what we're going to do, as I said, is in a couple minutes, take a quick break, and we come back from the break. I'm going to introduce to you our guest to talk about Temple University. You're going to hear their version. They'll let you know what their complaints are, what their concerns are, what their allegations are, and then we'll decide what could be done to help them to the extent you decide that they're worthy of your assistance. Once again, this is yours truly, attorney Michael Cord, aka Michael X, aka the angriest Black man in America. I'm doing this show, TV Courtroom, here at Philly Cam. And by the way, if you're checking it out the way you are checking it out, you might not realize that there are other ways to check it out. For example, we're on Comcast channels 66 and 966. We're also at Verizon Fios channels 29 and 30. It's more. You can check us out at phillycam.org. That's Philly, PHILLY, cam, CAM.org/web, WEB -channel. And you'll be able to see us and hear us and feel us. We got so much to share with you, got so much to talk about. It's really important. So important that I hope you get your pens out, your pads out, get your smartphones out so you can either record this or take notes, because this stuff is extremely important, extremely important. And what we're going to do in connection with all that is to have you learn what you need to do in order to help those who need help. Time now is 3:42. So for the next 60 seconds, we're going to take a quick break. You'll see some graphics, and then we'll be right back after that break, and you'll hear from my guest. First, the break. TV Courtroom with yours truly, attorney Michael X. And ladies and gentlemen, we are back. By we, I mean the staff here at TV Courtroom. This show is hosted by yours truly, attorney Michael Cord, aka Michael X, aka the angriest black man in America. I'm hoping that you can hear me with crystal clear reception. And as I pointed out earlier in the show, normally we do this show, TV Courtroom, at the Philly Cam studio in Center City, or we do it from my home studio off City Line Avenue. However, because I'm having work done, heavy duty renovation work done in my home with buzzing and sawing and hammering, I figured I'd set this up in my gazebo outside and do the show from outside. And that was a great idea until somebody decides to constantly ride by and play the worst music in the world as loud as they can possibly play it. But thanks to our producer and engineer and technician extraordinaire, Roland, he can kind of sort of muffle out that background sound so you might not hear it. Having said that, we got 3 topics we want to get into. One topic deals with the anniversary of what happened back on September 15, 1963 at exactly 10:24 p.m., which means next week will be exactly 59 years ago to the very day. We plan to talk about that because we know we won't be back on the air until October, so we want to let you know what happened on that date. In addition, we plan to talk about allegations of employment discrimination and systemic racism at Temple University. We planned for that. And then based on the news yesterday about the death of Queen Elizabeth, I want to give you a spin completely different from what the major media is giving you. As they presented, you would think that she was the best thing since sliced bread, but nothing could be further from the truth. I don't want to disparage anybody who doesn't deserve it, but I'm going to lay out some historical facts of what happened under her reign as the Queen of England. Right now, we're prepared to have 2 guests, and the music was silent for a while. Let's do this. What I'm going to do is, if I notice that the music in the background from whoever's driving around, if it gets too loud, I'm going to stop the interview with my guest and just do my whole monologue about what happened with the 16th Street Baptist Church. And then when the noise goes down, I'll bring the guests back up. Right now it's silent, but who knows what's going to happen in the next few minutes. Let's jump into our interview. As I pointed out, we have Stephan Branch, and we also have Reginald Allen. And for the next 10 to 12 minutes, assuming that the background noise is not too intense, you're going to hear from them. So I'm going to turn it over to them at this point. Stephan Branch is a former, what they call roving engineer. He's going to tell you exactly what that means. And he's not new to this. 16 years of this. He's going to tell you about his experience at Temple University, being unjustly terminated and being a victim of what he says is systemic racism. Joining him is an attorney who has at least a quarter century of experience, 25 years as an attorney, dealing primarily in the field of employment discrimination and civil rights. So I'm going to turn it over to these gentlemen first, starting with Stephan Branch. Stephan, tell us what happened with you. Tell us what your allegations are. But first, tell us exactly what a roving engineer is. And we can't hear.
I got you. Here we go. Okay, so a roving engineer at Temple University is an engineer that goes all around campus. He also leaves off the campus to go to different Temple sites when needed, or if an emergency occurs. So I got to check over 20 different buildings. In the beginning, when I started, it was like maybe 16, but every year it goes up and up and up. Is me and maybe one other engineer.
And you've been doing this for what, 16 years?
I've been an engineer since I was 18. I've been at Temple since 2004. I've been an engineer since 1997.
So in other words, you know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, before we hear from your attorney, what's your allegation? What's your complaint?
My complaint is a list of five major things: racism, wrongful termination, harassment, retaliation, and my FMLA rights were violated.
And tell us a little more. Well, stop right there because I want you to go into more detail. But before you do that, we want to hear from your attorney. As I pointed out, Reginald Allen, 25 years experience, primarily in the field of employment discrimination and civil rights. So if you want somebody for a job like this, he's obviously the guy to do it. Mr. Allen, how are you today?
Well, I'm good. Thank you for the compliment. And I've heard that you do great work in the field, and I've read some of your articles, and know that you have done a lot of work in these fields as well.
Well, let me say this. You and I are obviously both members of the Mutual Admiration Society. I appreciate that, and so do you.
Thank you very much.
So I'm just going to turn it over to you. Does Mr. Branch's allegations have any merit?
Of course they do. Unfortunately, not to disparage anyone, but Mr. Branch was represented by other counsel at his trial. That's another story for another day, but we believe that certain evidence that should have been brought into the case was not.
And let me say this, I can tell you are an excellent attorney because of the way you said what you said. Those who are listening closely to you, they can read between the lines and understand that you were speaking euphemistically. So we understand exactly what you were saying without saying it. Please continue.
So I should have added that he had a jury trial on his claims of racial discrimination and retaliation in violation of federal law, meaning Title VII, as well as 42 USC Section 1981, back last October. It was a jury trial in federal court. You surely know about the makeup of the juries in federal court, that you're lucky.
And take a minute take us a couple seconds to explain what you mean, because people think if it's a trial in Philadelphia that you got folks from North Philly and West Philly. That might be in state court trials, but tell us about federal court trials where you might not have anybody from Philadelphia.
So the federal court is actually called the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, that includes people within a 50-mile radius from the center of Philadelphia in every direction. So primarily the 8-member juries are not Philadelphians at all. They are usually people that come out from as far as Bucks County, Berks County, Montgomery County, Delaware County. And like I said, the 8-people juries, you're lucky if you normally get one minority on those juries. Yes. And that minority may not be an African American. It may be an Asian Indian, an Asian, or a Hispanic, or someone else. So
excellent point. Excellent point.
Unfortunately, these juries are almost designed,
yes,
in a way that African Americans and other people of color may not get a fair shake based on the preconceived beliefs of the jurors. All that.
In fact, what I like you to do, because you're breaking this down, but hold that thought, because I want you to go into more detail. I want you to tell us, without disparaging any other attorneys, what you would have done from the very beginning had you been involved from the very beginning. But before we hear your great legal strategy and what the options are now for Mr. Branch, tell us specifically what happened to you.
Okay, so basically, it started before I even knew about it, because my supervisor, who was Caucasian, I love him to death. His name is Brian Flanagan. He basically was protecting me from a guy named Sean Oonan, who has no engineering experience. And what happened was he got rid of Brian, all the good people they got rid of. So around 2017, he started coming after me. But every March, every year, 17, 18, 19, something came up where I didn't really do nothing. I'm like, in 13 years, I ain't getting no trouble. But every year after that, in March, he was trying to suspend me. Two of the times he did. In June of 18, they forced me to cancel my FMLA. I had 2 kids on FMLA for asthma.
Yeah, because some folks might not know what you mean by that term. Explain.
Okay. FMLA is Family Medical Leave Act. And by me saying it, just so everybody can know, when you get family medical leave for your children, you use your personal and your vacation time before you like don't get paid at all. So I really was still using my own time. So I went to the doctor, got all the documentation, and my union told me to do it. So after I did all that, they was like, "Oh, we putting you on day shift." I said, out of all these years, I've never worked day shift. Maybe overtime here and there. I said, I've done second and third. And it was like, oh, well, you got no choice. And the union didn't even do nothing about it. Now, it was a time where, and I'll say this real openly, anything that I'm being accused of or did or try to be disciplined for, my Caucasian engineering counterpart has done the same, if not worse, and they get no trouble. So as for the FMLA, I called Tipple. I said, I'm trying to figure out what to do. They said, well, when you don't have FMLA anymore, we'll put you back on your shift. The union said, oh, well, we can't fight it until they move you. So I said, that don't make sense. They tried to move a couple white guys, Caucasian engineers, from Tuesday to Saturday instead of Monday to Friday, and they stopped it. But for me, I was like, oh, they got to move you first. I said, well, I can't do it. So I told FMLA, I said, listen, I need to cancel it then. They said, you can't do that. I said, well, FMLA is supposed to help you. Y'all not accommodating me. So I wrote up a general letter just to like remove it. And the following year, because the following year I applied for one child and they approved it. You never should have to pick between children. And then in 2019, when they tried to suspend me for the third time, I finally went to the EEOC after one of my supervisors said, I hate you niggas over the phone when we were talking.
And let me say this. So you're saying that's a direct quote?
That's a direct quote over the phone. But again, he said it to me as he was hanging up the phone.
Okay.
Now, okay. So now, by this time, my supervisor Brian had called me. He said, Steve, he said, yo, you got to protect yourself. I'm going to tell you everything you got to do. I said, I took it for granted. I was like, no, for real. He said, Steve, stop playing. He said, listen, go report it to Temple's EEOC department. I did that. He said, go down to EEOC. I did that. He said, check your file. I said, okay. In 2017, the first time you tried to suspend me, it was partially my fault, but it wasn't nothing where you could get suspended about. And my supervisor, his name was Anthony Calcagno, he said, Steve, file a grievance, you'll get your money back because she should suspend you. In 2018, a water main broke on the street. I can't fix a water main break. And I checked over 20-something buildings. I think I missed 2. And we always taught if you had something going on and you missed something, then you will get in trouble. It's suspension. My union rep said, oh, you can't grieve it. I had to call the union office. I never got a grievance. In 2019, I never got a grievance. Once I went to the Equal Opportunity of Employment, where you go to report this type of stuff, the real EEOC, but it was a total of 7 of us that went down there because he started going after other black engineers. And we got our right to sue. And what happened, if I got my right to sue, they did some type of like group, they both write-ups, suspensions from 1819, Temple's HR department and my union did something where they combined it and said, oh, we're going to do it now. So they tried to get rid of it. Now, when they did everybody, is that me?
Yeah, I do hear some feedback, but we still can hear you. Please continue.
Okay, so basically, I think they messed up because it was like 6 or 7 of us that went down there. When they start responding to the accusations, they turned in documentation. He started writing up everybody, like general mechanics, painters, all trades. And what happened was one of my coworkers came to me and said, Steve, look, they responded. He showed me. It was a couple write-ups in there. So I'm checking the write-ups. And I'm like, wait a minute. I said, there's like 3 write-ups for being later here. All write-ups are supposed to go in your file, not a general warning, not a verbal. What I seen was he backdated late documents that my supervisor didn't want to give me. And so, for example, one document was from December, one was from like February. My supervisor tried to give them to me at the same time, and I said, you can't do that. That's not progressive discipline. You're supposed to give it to me one at a time. So then he said, don't worry about it. He said, but he basically said, Sean making me do this. I said, okay, don't worry about it. He never gave it to me. I said, can I get a picture of it? He said, no. I had already took a picture of it. So I got pictures, emails, text messages. After that, when I seen those 3 documents, he tried to, when they wrongfully terminated me in January of 2020, I brought all the paperwork with me. And I said, can I ask you a question? He said, you can ask me. I said, you're my assistant director. You're not my supervisor. Why did you like backdate these documents? You backdated all of them from April, February, and December. You dated them all April. I said, then this April one, I checked my file. Brian Flanagan told me, y'all falsified documents. This not even in my file. I checked my file, but you gave it to the Equal Opportunity of Employment. And then I said, we also get 10 sick days a year. I said, a Caucasian engineer that was a trainee took 12 sick days, and you gave him a general counseling, which disappears by July. He gave it to him like in June. He set a group of guys down and said, look, I got to go through everything, write you guys up, but it'll disappear by July. I got all documentation. I had over 10 witnesses. 2 of my supervisors, Caucasian, came and testified. One of them testified. He said, why you got all these black guys making money, especially that nigger, Stephen Branch? And then he said, you need to like write it up and stuff. And my supervisor said, no. He said, well, we'll get him. We'll get that nigga one day if you.
And let me just stop you right there. Let me stop you because you mentioned the so-called N-word 3 times. Any of those 3 times that you just alluded to, any witnesses to that besides you? There were.
My supervisor, Brian Flanagan, testified in court that
Okay.
Sean said, you got all these niggas making money, especially that nigga Stephen Branch. And he said, we'll get that nigga one day. He was trying to fire me. And Brown was like, no, he's my go-to guy. My
All
other
right, so
superstar.
let's stop right there. We want to come back to you. Now we want to get to your attorney. Those just tuned in, you're listening to Stephen Branch, a former roving engineer at Temple University, 16 years of experience. He points out that he was unjustly terminated and is a victim of systemic racism. Joining him is his attorney extraordinaire, Reginald Allen, 25 years of experience in the field you need for cases like this, those fields being employment discrimination and civil rights. Attorney Allen, talk to us about plaintiffs who are similarly situated, about discriminatory treatment, about Pennsylvania being an at-will state. Talk to us about the law as it pertains to Mr. Branch's complaints.
So, Mr. Branch alleged several things, of course, racial discrimination. And you just heard him state that, in fact, on multiple occasions, his upper level manager, Mr. Onan, referred to him and called him a nigger. Mr. Branch additionally reported racial discrimination to Temple's internal management on multiple occasions. The result of that was absolutely nothing. They did nothing to investigate or correct his allegations, which obviously is illegal. It violates federal law not to investigate and then take corrective action when you found out that someone is discriminated based on race and other categories. Additionally, we would say that there was testimony by, I believe it's Mr. Flanagan at the trial, that in fact Onan had called Mr. Branch a nigger. To our knowledge, nothing has still happened to Mr. Onan. He is still gainfully employed at Temple. The individual that was responsible to field the retaliation complaints, who was also named as a defendant, Sharon Boyle, who did nothing, is still gainfully employed at Temple. So it's kind of showing that Temple, although it claims to be a beacon of diversity and fairness, has real serious issues still dealing with racism in a real way and correcting it. It's still deeply ingrained and rooted in their system.
So let me ask this. It seems as egregious as Mr. Branch just mentioned. So what's the problem? One, why wouldn't Temple settle something like this? And two, apart from what you mentioned about the composition of the jury, why wasn't this a slam dunk in court? In fact, we'll get you, Mr. Branch, when you're from the attorney, then we'll get back to you.
He'll speak in a second, but I wasn't counsel at trial, but I've read the transcripts of the trial. The case is currently on appeal. And we're alleging some errors regarding evidence that was allowed to come in that was done basically to assassinate Mr. Branch's character. I just state one specific example was they sought to introduce, and they did subtly introduce some information regarding him having a female visitor at campus, which they claim is a basis to terminate him. In fact,
let me stop you there. And I love the way you're
bad guy. So
I love the way you're breaking it down. Hold on one second, because I want to. In fact, I want you to continue that train of thought. But explain what it means to be in an at-will state.
In Pennsylvania, which is one of those states where an employer can essentially fire anyone that doesn't have an employment contract for any reason, as long as that reason is not illegal or against public policy. All that being said, it is illegal for an institution or an individual under Section 1981 to discriminate against somebody based on their race. Going back to similarly situated individuals, Mr. Branch alluded to and mentioned some individuals, I believe, that were treated better than he, Caucasian individuals with respect to work conditions. I know one of his allegations in his complaint was that Mr. Unan and his people under him had a tendency to assign the African American engineers to work in unsafe environments, making them go out in the dark to dangerous work sites where they didn't do that for Caucasian engineers. So in addition to the racial slurs, there were real issues in terms of work assignments. There were issues in terms of time off. There were issues regarding equality, regarding the issuance of discipline.
Well, let me say this. I really appreciate you being the attorney that you are. Attorneys tend to use legal jargon, and nobody but other attorneys and judges have any idea what the hell they're talking about. I love the way you break it down. You obviously graduated from the school of Malcolm X, where he talked about make it plain, and you certainly made it plain. We're going to wrap things up with you in just a minute, where you tell us more about where things stand now. You mentioned the appeal. But before we do that, let's go back to Mr. Branch. Mr. Branch, if there are any other egregious examples you want to share with the audience, let us know that. And any other information, primarily contact information, so that folks can reach out to you or your attorney to provide assistance. But anything you want to add before Attorney Allen wraps it up?
Okay, real quick, I'll just get it off. So basically, a part of the retaliation too is, because I tried to fight them, they tried to offer me money twice, and I said no, like pennies on a dollar. Now they're trying to sue me for the bill of costs, which is, I was told 20,000, now it's 34. So if I lose this because I'm fighting them, then they're gonna try to sue me for 34,000. Other things they have done is, I'll give you an example. For me, with being late, they used to correct the guy named Joe Crow's time, or Caucasian engineer, and everybody I'm naming no longer works at Temple. They either left or got fired because of this. The supervisor that called me, I hate you niggas over the phone, Bill Schweitzer, he resigned and went to another job. My African-American coworker, Brandon Faison, they made him a supervisor to try to make it look good. Another guy named Greg Mims was awarded 3 of my late days. They took it back to 2. He still took 3 more days. And when they found out, and this Bill Schweitzer knew about it, they let him retire. They didn't even mess with him. Another guy named, his last name was Pazarati, was out on workman's comp, white guy. They knew he had another job. A guy named Raheem, he now works at, I can't say work at Raheem. He was working, he went on workman's comp, but he was working part-time at the Temple Hospital. When he came back and told them he had another job somewhere else, they fired him. So it's all types of examples of what they do to us that they don't do to the Caucasian engineer. What else? My FMLA.
Because we're running out of time, but so what do you want the viewing and listening audience to do?
Well, basically, now that I got all this knowledge, if you want to reach out to me, Stephen Branch on Facebook, you can reach out to me. Also, the HR director, she helped them. Like my supervisor, Bob Ides, testified. He brags about, she is my friend. She helps him, do this, and she still has her job. So if you, my information on here is Stephen Branch. My phone number 267-979-6349. Because make no mistake, once I start putting it out there, a lot of Temple employees start telling me about different divisions where they do this.
In fact, before we wrap things up with your attorney, give us that email address and that phone number again very slowly so folks can write it down.
All right, phone number 267-979-6349. Email address, S as in Sam, my last name Branch, like a tree, 15@gmail.com.
Excellent, excellent. And the final 30 seconds for you before we hear from your attorney. What do you want to add? What do you want to repeat? What do you want to highlight?
I just want to highlight that I'm trying to get it out there to the media. So basically, Temple is very powerful, and a lot of attorneys did not want my case. And the attorneys that did have it looked up on it, and they didn't do right, but we'll get another time. So basically, I'm just trying to make everybody aware. People can come forward, and if they want to call me, I can tell them all the steps to take to exhaust all the options. That way they got the proof. Because everything, you got to have documents, emails, phone numbers, witnesses. I got over 10 witnesses, and all my witnesses didn't come to court. All my evidence wasn't supplied. I got pictures of people sleeping, white guys sleeping and everything. Pictures of people driving around campus. I got a lot of evidence.
Very well said. Those who are listening heard the voice of Mr. Stephen Branch, a former roving engineer at Temple University. He's not new to this. 16 years of experience, unjustly terminated, as he explains it, and a victim of systemic racism, as he broke it down. As you see from our producer extraordinaire, Roland, we posted his email address along with his phone number.
Can I say one more thing?
All for
One more
some
important thing.
Well, let me say this. We're running out of time, but we got to get to your attorney. Mr. Allen, what do you want to repeat or highlight, and tell us about this appellate process? What happens next?
So the case is currently pending briefs. The appellant's brief is due on September 19th, so that'll be done. Thereafter, the Temple will have approximately a month to file their brief, and then the case will be decided, possibly with oral argument. But I just wanted to just highlight again that, you know, Temple has a reputation in the community as being this great beacon of diversity and fairness. I actually have another relatively high-profile federal case with Temple that involves issues of disability and race discrimination and retaliation that has illuminated my eyes to my former law school that, in fact, Temple, unfortunately, appears not to practice what it preaches. Even though they've hired a new African-American president, I would hope that he gets wind of this publicity that we're doing and starts to really look at his house and clean it out as appropriate, because they have some major problems there in their management that, of course, filter down to the lower level employees that are creating major problems for minorities, particularly African Americans, in my opinion.
And I noticed that Mr. Branch wanted to add something. We're running out of time, but I'm going to give him the final 20 seconds. But you, Mr. Allen, if folks want to reach you, is there a website, email address, phone number, social media? How can folks reach you, not only about this case, but because of your extensive experience as a civil rights attorney and employment discrimination attorney, they might need representation. How can folks reach you?
So I allow people to call my
And it appears that we might have lost Mr. Allen. It seems that his screen has frozen. But that's okay. We got the information we needed. And Mr. Branch, I'm sorry, Mr. Allen, we lost you for a second.
264-5120, or my email, which is Reginald, REGINALD Allen, ALLEN 08 at Comcast.
In fact, what I was about to say is that the good thing about technology is that it's technology. The bad thing about technology is that it's technology. And the same thing that makes it run perfectly is the very same thing that makes it run imperfectly. We're going to try to go back to Mr. Allen because his screen froze, so we couldn't hear his contact information. So we're going to give it one final shot, and hopefully Mr. Allen can tell us his email address, his phone number, any other contact without technology throwing the gremlins in. And then after that, we'll go straight to Stephen Branch so he can add his final thought. But let's try to hear from Mr. Allen again, and hopefully technology works the way it's supposed to work. Mr. Allen, go ahead.
.net police department or surrounding counties. You can also contact me regarding.
We got most of that, but we'll just keep moving. And if folks are interested in speaking to Mr. Allen and didn't get his contact information, don't worry about it. You can contact Mr. Branch, and Mr. Branch will be happy to forward that information regarding Mr. Allen, because not many attorneys specialize in the field of employment discrimination and civil rights litigation and are conscious and woke, and that's definitely Mr. Allen. We're going to give the final 30 seconds to Stephen Branch.
One very important thing a lot of people don't know. If you can have 100% proof everything on these people, what you need to realize is when they don't got nothing on you, they will go after your life. They will go track and see whatever dirt they can dig up on you, even if they got nothing to do with the case. So be mindful of your social medias, any of that. Be careful, because once you put a target on your back, they're going to dig up anything. Like I wrote a book that was fiction. They brought that to the case, which makes no sense because I didn't do it in my trial. So that's about it. Just be careful of your social media and all that good stuff, because they'll go after everything. I don't have no convictions, nothing. They want to know all that. I ain't got no criminal record history, any of that.
I'm so glad that we had you on to share your allegations regarding Temple University. I'm definitely happy that we had Mr. Reginald Allen. And based on what I'm hearing, this probably won't be the last that we hear from you about this case. We thank you, Mr. Stephen Branch. Thank you, Attorney Reginald Allen. Folks, time now is 4:16, which means we have about 11 minutes left to try to squeeze in two topics. One, a prepared topic, and the second is breaking news. So we didn't prepare anything, but we know world history. So we're going to spend the final couple minutes talking about that. But first, and to me, this topic that I'm going to share with you now is near and dear. By the way, before I continue, got to give a big shout out to our producer, Roland, because there's so much going wrong. You've seen major news networks, and I've watched them, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? What's up with the audio? What's up with the video? Not knowing that behind the scenes, technicians are scrambling to get it together because you never know what's going to happen with technology. But thanks to Roland, we were able to get through not only the background noise that he was able to muffle away, and able to try to get back to our guest even when we had their system freezing up. So big shout out to Philly Cam and big shout out to Roland. Having said that, let me spend a couple minutes talking about the topic that I had prepared for, and then breaking news. And I'd like you all to jot this down because I'm a part of an organization called ATTAC, ATAC. That stands for Avenging the Ancestors Coalition, Avenging the Ancestors. The ancestors are those who've gone on to the other side. And if they've gone on through wickedness and evil and criminality, that's a wrong. Somebody has to right that wrong. And how do you right that wrong? By avenging those people. Now, I want to be clear. Avenge and revenge are not synonymous. Revenge means you do the same bad thing to that person that person did to you. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about revenge. I'm talking about avenge. Avenge means to focus on the victim and to help the victim by saving the victim or by telling the story of the victim and raising the victim up so that truth will be known. Revenge focuses on the victimizer. Avenge focuses on the victim. That's why our organization is called Avenging the Ancestors Coalition, because we want to tell their story, the story of every enslaved Black person, not only in America, but throughout the diaspora. Having said that, folks, jot down the date of September 15, 1963, because I want you on Wednesday, actually it would be Thursday, the 12th is Monday, the 13th is Tuesday, which means the 15th is Thursday. So on Thursday, September 15, I'd like you to pause, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, at 10:24 a.m. Because on September 15, 2022, at exactly 10:24 a.m., it'll be precisely 59 years ago to the very day that 4 babies, 4 children, 4 little girls were blown apart. 11-year-old Denise McNair, 14-year-old Addie Mae Collins, 14-year-old Carol Robertson, 14-year-old Cynthia Wesley. These little girls and other little girls and boys were at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. and they actually had attended a Sunday school sermon that was captioned, or I should say, that was entitled "A Love That Forgives." So after these little girls and little boys hear this, they're all lining up to go into the main sanctuary of the church for the 11 o'clock service. And I wrote about this a couple years ago in the Philadelphia Tribune. In fact, each year I write in the Tribune about it. This year I wrote about it, so you can get it, a copy of it this Sunday in the Philadelphia Tribune. All you got to do is go to phillytrib.com. That's phillytrib.com. And once you go to phillytrib.com, as our producer extraordinaire Roland posted on the screen, just type in CORD, COARD, and type in the words "4 little girls." And let me just read this part of what I wrote. It goes like this. 59 years ago, on September 15, 1963, at 10:24 a.m., 4 sweet, innocent, and defenseless little black girls were murdered by white domestic terrorists. When we think about terrorists, we always think about foreigners. And we think about, in America, foolishly and erroneously think about brown foreigners. But we got terrorists right here in America. We got domestic terrorists right here in America. We got white domestic terrorists right here in America. So while in Sundays, I'll continue the article, while in Sunday school on that date being September 15, 1963, those 4 little girls were in the basement dressing room preparing for the Sunday sermon. During the children's preparation, we know at least and maybe more, at least 15 sticks of dynamite attached to a timing device detonated under the church steps near the basement. The powerful explosion not only killed those 4, but seriously injured more than 20 other children and adults, including Addie Mae Collins' 12-year-old sister, Sarah, who lost an eye when 15 pieces of glass shards were embedded into her pretty little brown face. Think about this. This was so outrageous, as I pointed out at the beginning of the show. Then President JFK called it, quote, cruel and tragic. The great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said it was, quote, one of the most vicious and tragic crimes ever perpetrated against humanity, unquote. So it was so outrageous that it wasn't just folks in Birmingham, wasn't just folks in Alabama, wasn't just folks in the South, wasn't just folks in America, but it was an international outrage. Let me read the next part to you. Despite international outrage in reaction to this evil public act, one of the 4 responsible KKK domestic terrorists, because they were all members of the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK, one of the 4 responsible KKK domestic terrorists, namely a guy by the name of Herman Cash, died of natural causes 31 years later in 1994 without ever being charged. So one of the 4, because we were able to find out through investigative work that 4 white men, 4 Klan members were behind this. One died 31 years later without ever being charged. That left 3. And let me continue this. We got about 3 minutes left. And of the other 3 murderous conspirators, criminal charges weren't filed against one, namely Robert Chambliss, until 1997, after which he was finally sentenced to life imprisonment. And to make matters worse, Thomas Blanton and Don Cherry weren't found guilty and sentenced to life until 2001 and 2002, respectively, which was about 40 years, count them, 40 years after the gruesome murders. By the way, one of those 3 I mentioned, in particular Thomas Blanton, died in prison of natural causes on June 26, 2020, 2 years ago. Again, many people think you shouldn't celebrate the death of anyone, but if somebody is evil and wicked and pass away, I'd argue that celebration is warranted. There's much more that I wrote about in this Tribune article, but the main thing is that 4 little girls, age 11, 1, and the other 3, 14, brutally murdered. When you think about this story, think about your daughters, your granddaughters, your nieces, your grandnieces. Think about the little girl down the street who goes to the supermarket for you. Those are the babies that were brutally murdered on September 15, 1963, at exactly 10:24 a.m. So on September 15, 2022, it'll be exactly 59 years ago to the very day. I want you to stop and I want you to pause and I want you to do what we call libation in the African community. We believe that if you call out people's name, they're really not dead. They're going on to the other side, but their energy, their spirit, their soul continues to resurrect each time their name is called out. That's why I call out the name of 11-year-old Denise McNair. I call out the name of 14-year-old Addie Mae Collins, 14-year-old Carol Robertson, and 14-year-old Cynthia Wesley. Remember those 4 babies and avenge the ancestors. And our final minute and a half, 2 minutes, the breaking news is Queen Elizabeth passed away. And just like I said about one of the KKK members, I don't shed tears for people who represent evil. And Queen Elizabeth might not have ever personally shot somebody in the head or personally stabbed somebody in the back, but she is responsible for wholesale genocide against peoples, not just Black people in Africa, but brown people in India. That woman had reigned as queen for 70 years, since 1952. You want to know what else happened in 1952? There was a state of emergency imposed by Britain against the Black folks in their own African country of Kenya. You might have heard about the Mau Mau. The Mau Mau were a group of Black folks who decided that we can't have these white folks from Britain coming in here and taking over our country. We got to do what the white founding fathers did here in America in the 13 colonies when they took up arms against Great Britain. But Great Britain had been oppressing Africa, oppressing India much worse than what they were doing to the 13 colonies. At least Britain treated the 13 colonies as human beings. Britain did not treat those in Africa and those in India. In fact, when we talk about the international slave trade, we're talking about Britain. There's a guy named Captain John Hawkins who was the first to engage in the international slave trade from England when he bought and sold 300 Africans in exchange for sugar in 1562. And who was the queen then? Queen Elizabeth I. Fast forward to now, we got Queen Elizabeth II. And if you check out the history, it continues to be egregious. There's much more I got to share with you, but run out of time. Big shout out to our guests, Stephen Branch and attorney Reginald Allen. But the biggest shout out to our producer extraordinaire Roland for getting us through the loud noises in the back while I had to do my show outside and the technical gremlins that caused some of the freezing during our interview. Thank you, Roland. And folks, check me out on Saturdays on WURD 96.1 FM, where I do the radio courtroom, which is similar to the TV courtroom. Thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend.